Daniel had lived on his ranch for so many years that the land felt like the only companion he truly knew. Every morning, he stepped outside before the sun was fully awake, breathing in the cool air that rolled across the open Arizona land. The sky always stretched endlessly above him, painted in soft colors of blue, orange, and quiet gold. For most people, the silence would feel heavy. But for Daniel, it was simply part of life. He had grown used to the sound of wind touching the grass, the soft steps of his horses, and the calm rhythm of days that looked almost the same. He lived miles away from the nearest town, and even the closest ranch was far enough that he could work for weeks without seeing another person. It was a simple life, but also a lonely one. He often reminded himself that this peaceful solitude was the life he had chosen. Still, there were days when he wished someone would share a meal with him, or laugh with him during the quiet evenings, or simply talk about things that didn't fit into the routines of work and chores. But he pushed those thoughts away. Life on the land required focus and strength, and he believed feelings were something to deal with later, if later ever came. Not far from where Daniel lived, another quiet life was unfolding, but in a different way. Naya had recently returned to her family's land after being away for many years. She was an Apache woman who carried her heritage with quiet pride and gentle strength. Her childhood memories were filled with the sound of songs, stories told around warm fires, and long walks across land that meant more than just soil. It meant history. It meant home, but returning home was not as easy as she thought. Her grandmother, the person who had taught her the meaning of traditions, had passed away, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than any quiet desert morning. So, Naya lived alone now, trying to rebuild her connection with the land she loved, while also learning how to live without the warmth of the person who understood her the most. She spent her days caring for her small piece of land, tending to her horse, and gathering things she needed from a small trading post that stood like a lonely dot on the map. It was at this trading post that her path crossed with Daniel's for the first time. The sun was high that day, bright but not harsh. Daniel had ridden into the trading post to buy some supplies, flour, feed, a few tools he needed for fence repairs. He tied his horse to the post outside and walked in quietly, greeting the shop owner with a small nod. He wasn't the type to talk much, especially in public. But he was kind. And the shop owner always appreciated that. Naya arrived a few minutes later, her horse stopping with soft steps in the dust. She climbed down, checked her saddle out of habit, and noticed something was wrong. A strap had loosened in a way she hadn't seen before. She tried to fix it quickly, but the leather was stubborn. Her fingers pressed against it again and again. But the knot wouldn't tighten. She sighed softly, wishing for her grandmother's patient hands and gentle voice telling her, "Slow down. The leather listens better when you're calm." For a moment, she closed her eyes and breathed deeply. When she opened them, she saw Daniel walking out of the trading post. He noticed her struggling and paused. He wasn't the type to walk into other people's problems, but something about her expression, a mix of frustration and quiet sadness, made him step closer. "Looks like that strap's giving you trouble," he said in a calm, low voice. Naya looked up, surprised. She didn't know him, but his tone carried no judgment, only simple kindness. She stepped aside slightly. "It's been slipping since this morning. I think the knot is old." Daniel examined the strap, his hands steady and sure. "Yeah, the leather's a bit dry. You've been riding long today?" "Long enough," she answered with a small smile. His fingers worked carefully, looping the strap in a stronger, cleaner knot. He pulled it tight, making sure it wouldn't slip again. Then he stepped back. That should hold for a while. Naya touched the strap, testing it. It felt secure. "Thank you," she said softly. "I was getting more frustrated than I should." "Friend, it happens," he said, shrugging a little. "Some days everything feels harder." She nodded. And for a moment, they simply stood there. Two strangers in the warm sunlight, sharing a quiet understanding without needing many words. Daniel didn't know why he hesitated before walking away, but something about her calmness, even in her frustration, stayed with him. He nodded once more and headed to his horse. Naya watched him for a moment, then gathered her things, feeling strangely lighter. A small act of kindness had softened her day, even if only slightly. They both rode home that day thinking about the simple, warm moment they had shared. For Daniel, it was the first naturally pleasant conversation he had experienced in weeks. He didn't realize how much he missed simple human interaction until that exchange brought it back for a moment. For Naya, it reminded her that even though she felt alone, the world still had gentle people in it. A few days later, fate, or maybe just the small size of the area, brought them together again. This time, it was on a narrow trail, where the desert land met a small patch of green near a stream. Daniel was riding slowly, letting his horse drink, when he saw someone approaching from the opposite direction. When the figure came closer, he recognized Naya, sitting tall and relaxed on her horse. She smiled quietly, surprised to see him but also genuinely pleased. "We meet again," she said. Daniel nodded. "Seems so." They talked for a moment, nothing deep, nothing emotional. Just simple topics. The weather, the calmness of the morning, how their horses seemed unusually peaceful that day. Daniel wasn't used to talking so much during his rides, but he found himself enjoying her presence. Naya felt the same. She didn't need loud words or big gestures. She appreciated the soft, thoughtful pauses in between their sentences. Over the next few weeks, their paths crossed again and again, sometimes at the trading post, sometimes on the open land, and other times without either of them expecting it. Each meeting added a small thread of familiarity between them. They never forced the conversations. They just let them happen in the easy rhythm of nature. One day, Naya told him about her grandmother, not in a heavy or sad way, but with quiet respect. She explained how she returned to the land to reconnect with her roots, even though the silence sometimes felt too big to face alone. Daniel listened. He was good at listening, and for the first time in a long while, he opened up a little in return. He told her how long he had lived on his ranch, how he had grown used to being alone, though some days were harder than others. Their conversations were simple, but they carried something meaningful. A slow, gentle trust, forming without hurry. Neither of them said it aloud, but they both felt the same thing. A quiet comfort that came from knowing someone else understood the weight of solitude. They were still strangers in many ways, yet their hearts recognized something familiar. Two lives shaped by silence, now slowly finding a place where their quietness felt shared, instead of lonely. The days that followed brought a gentle change in the quiet rhythm of Daniel's life. He still woke before sunrise, still fed the horses, still checked the fences, and still lived in long stretches of silence. But now, there was something new in the back of his mind, something warm that he didn't fully understand. He found himself thinking about the moments he had shared with Naya. They had been small, simple moments, but they stayed with him as naturally as the memory of sunlight or wind. Sometimes, while working, he would wonder if he might see her again on one of the open trails. Other times, he would replay their conversations, how easily she spoke, how calm her voice sounded, how her eyes softened when she talked about her grandmother. He didn't feel excited in a loud way. Instead, it was a quiet happiness, the kind that settles inside like a gentle breeze, a happiness he hadn't felt in a long time. Naya also noticed that her days felt different. She still walked her land every morning, still talked to her horse as if it understood every word, and still cooked her meals alone in her small home. But now, she didn't feel as cut off from the world as before. The memory of Daniel's presence softened the lonely edges of her days. She felt that somewhere nearby, someone else moved through the world with the same quiet steps as hers. One morning, she took her horse for a long ride along a trail she used to explore with her grandmother years ago. The sky was clear, the wind soft, and the air carried the clean scent of desert plants. As she rode, she noticed a familiar figure in the distance, a man on horseback, moving calmly along the same path. She recognized Daniel right away. When he saw her, he slowed his horse and waited. She rode up beside him with a soft smile. "Good morning," she said. "Morning," he replied with a tone that carried more warmth than usual. They rode slowly together, letting the horses set a comfortable pace. Neither of them needed to rush. They shared simple stories, small things about their week. Naya talked about her horse refusing to walk through a puddle because it thought it was deeper than it was. Daniel laughed quietly, a sound rare but warm. Daniel told her about a fence post that kept leaning no matter how many times he fixed it. Naya smiled and said, maybe the wind simply liked playing small tricks on him. Their words were gentle, filled with simple humor and easy understanding. After that morning, their meetings seemed to happen more often. Not forced, not planned, just natural. Sometimes they met by the stream, where the water shimmered in the sunlight. Other times, they crossed paths at the trading post. The shop owner began to notice, but he didn't say anything. He simply smiled whenever they walked in together or left at the same time. They talked about everything and nothing. They talked about the weather, which was always a safe topic but somehow interesting between them. They talked about the land, how different parts looked after rain, or how certain trails felt softer under the horses' steps. They talked about plants, animals, sunsets, seasons, and all the little things that made up their everyday lives. One afternoon, they sat near a small patch of shade under a tall tree. Their horses rested nearby, while the wind blew gently across the land. "You were born here?" Daniel asked softly. Naya nodded. "Yes. My grandmother taught me the stories of this place. She said the land remembers everything." That's a nice thought," he replied. She believed it. "I think I do too. Sometimes when I walk alone, it feels like the land is welcoming me back." Daniel looked across the wide space in front of them. "I've lived here a long time, but I never thought about it like that." Naya smiled. "Maybe you were listening in your own way." Naya smiled. Daniel didn't respond right away. He looked at her with quiet appreciation, realizing how naturally she saw meaning in things he had looked at, but never truly noticed. Naya then talked a little about her childhood, not in a dramatic way, but with soft fondness. She told him how her grandmother showed her how to read the sky, how to find direction by looking at the shape of plants, how to sense when the weather was about to change. She shared memories of waking up early to gather herbs, of learning songs passed down from her ancestors, of long evenings filled with stories that made the past feel alive. Daniel listened closely. He rarely met someone who spoke with such calm honesty. Every word she said felt connected to something deeper, something steady and peaceful. "I bet your grandmother was a strong woman," he said quietly. "She was," Naya replied. "Strong, but kind. She never rushed anything. She always said people miss the important things because they move too fast." Daniel nodded slowly. "I think she would say I move too slowly." Naya laughed softly. "No. You move at your own pace. That's not a bad thing." Her words lingered in the air, gentle but sincere. It surprised Daniel how easily she understood him, even though they didn't know each other very well. But maybe knowing someone didn't always require long years. Sometimes it just needed patience and open hearts. Over time, their trust grew in small moments, moments that seemed ordinary to others but meant a lot to them. One day, Daniel noticed Naya sitting by the stream, looking quietly at the water. He approached, not wanting to interrupt, but she turned and smiled before he could speak. "I was hoping I'd see you today," she said softly. He sat beside her. "Everything all right?" "Yes," she said. "Just a quiet day." Quiet days were something Daniel understood well. They sat together without speaking for a few minutes, listening to the soft sound of flowing water. Another time, Naya brought him a small pouch filled with herbs her grandmother used to collect. "These help with tiredness," she explained. "You work long days. You might need them." Daniel accepted the gift with genuine appreciation. Nobody had brought him a thoughtful gift in years. Maybe longer. He carried the pouch in his pocket for days, not even wanting to use it, just holding it reminded him of her kindness. There were also moments when Daniel helped Naya in return. Once, her horse refused to cross a narrow path filled with scattered rocks. Daniel guided his own horse across first, then stood beside hers, speaking softly until the animal felt safe enough to move. Naya watched him with gratitude in her eyes. "You're good with horses," she said. "I've had a lot of practice," he replied. With each shared moment, they learned more about each other, not through big confessions, but through the rhythm of everyday life. They learned the way the other smiled, the softness of certain words, the quiet strength behind their silence. They learned that some people didn't need loud voices or big actions to connect. Sometimes the connection came from gentle understanding. Their bond grew slowly, but steadily. Like a plant that doesn't rush to bloom but becomes stronger with each sunrise. Neither of them spoke about the growing closeness between them. There was no need. It lived in their actions, the way Naya's eyes softened when Daniel arrived, the way Daniel relaxed when she was near, the way their conversations flowed without effort. Day by day, their loneliness began to feel different. Not gone, but lighter, easier to carry. Because now, when they looked across the open land, it didn't feel like an empty stretch of silence. It felt like a space where someone else moved, lived, breathed, and understood. Their story had not reached its deepest moment yet, but the foundation was built strong, gentle, and real. The weeks passed gently, almost like soft waves touching the shore. Daniel and Naya's connection kept growing. Not suddenly, but slowly and steadily, like sunrise spreading across the land. Little by little, neither of them talked about it, but both felt it clearly. They were two people who had learned to live with silence. Yet now they found themselves wanting company more than they expected. Their meetings continued, sometimes planned, but mostly by coincidence. They would run into each other on quiet trails, near the trading post, or by the small stream that had become a peaceful resting spot for both of them. Each time, they talked a little more, shared a little deeper, and stayed a little longer. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. Instead, it felt warm, safe, and meaningful. One late afternoon, Daniel was fixing a part of his fence when he noticed the sky turning an unusual shade of soft pink. He paused his work and looked at the horizon. The colors were so gentle and beautiful that he felt a calmness fill his chest. It reminded him of the last time he had seen a sunset like this, when he and Naya were riding together along the canyon. They had stopped for a moment, not to admire the view, but simply because they both wanted to enjoy a peaceful break. The memory warmed him. He wondered if she was watching the same sunset from her home. On the other side of the open land, Naya was indeed looking at the same sky. She stood outside her home, her arms wrapped around herself, feeling the cool breeze brush past her. Sunsets had always been special to her. Her grandmother used to say that sunset was the time when the day shared its last secrets before resting. Naya believed that, but lately, sunsets had started to feel a little heavy. She missed talking to someone during these quiet moments. She missed having a person beside her who understood her silence, without asking her to fill it with words. She thought of Daniel. She wondered if he ever felt the same kind of loneliness she carried. She knew he didn't show it, but she sensed it in the way his eyes softened sometimes, in the way he hesitated before leaving whenever they met, as if part of him didn't want the day to end yet. She knew that feeling well. The next morning, the weather was calm, the sun bright, and the air warm. Daniel decided to take a ride along the canyon trail, a place where he often found peace when his thoughts grew too heavy. As he saddled his horse, he caught himself hoping he might see Naya somewhere along the way. He did not always allow himself to hope, but that morning felt different. Naya also woke with a quiet restlessness. She didn't plan to go anywhere particular, but her heart pulled her toward the canyon. Something inside her felt full, as if she needed to let her thoughts out into the open space. She mounted her horse and rode out slowly, letting the land guide her. As fate would have it, they reached the canyon around the same time. Daniel saw her first. She was standing near the edge, her horse tied to a nearby tree. She looked peaceful, but there was a small sadness on her face that he did not usually see. He approached quietly, not wanting to startle her. When she heard the soft steps of his horse behind her, she turned and smiled. It was a gentle smile, but not as bright as usual. "You're out early today," she said. "Couldn't stay home," he replied softly. Felt like the land was calling. She nodded. "I know that feeling." He dismounted and tied his horse beside hers. They stood side by side, looking at the canyon. The wind brushed past them, carrying the faint scent of wild plants and warm earth. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. Daniel glanced at her. "You okay?" Her eyes remained on the canyon. I don't know," she answered honestly. She didn't try to pretend she was fine. She didn't need to with him. Daniel waited. He didn't push, didn't rush. He knew she would speak when she was ready. Naya took in a deep breath, and when she exhaled, her voice came out softer than before. "Sometimes the land feels too big, too quiet. Even though I love it, I feel something missing." Daniel nodded slowly. "I understand." She turned slightly, looking at him. And in her eyes, there was a mixture of sadness, courage, and longing. She hesitated only for a moment, before speaking the words she had held inside for so long. "I'm so tired of being alone." The words floated into the air like a fragile truth, simple, yet heavy. Daniel felt them in his chest. He didn't look away. He didn't break eye contact. He stood still, letting her feel heard. Naya's voice trembled just a little. "I try to be strong. I try to live the way my grandmother taught me. But strength doesn't fill the quiet nights. Strength doesn't make the days feel less empty. I miss having someone to talk to, someone to share small things with, someone who understands." Daniel's heart tightened, not in pain, but in recognition. He understood those feelings more than she knew. He had lived with them for years. He knew the weight of loneliness, the kind that settled into the bones quietly, and stayed there. He took a slow breath. "You're not the only one who feels that way." She looked at him with surprise and a small hint of relief, as if she had been waiting to hear someone say those words. Daniel wasn't a man who talked much, but now he felt the need to speak. "I've lived alone for a long time," he said quietly. "I thought I chose it. I thought it was the life I wanted. But some days, the silence gets too loud. There are moments when I wish someone would be there at the table, or walking beside me, or just sitting on the porch at the end of the day." Naya listened with full attention. This was the first time he had opened his heart like this. Daniel looked at the canyon again. "I guess I just learned to live with it. But that doesn't mean I don't feel it." Naya stepped a little closer. "Not much. Just enough to show she understood. Enough to show she cared." "I didn't think you got lonely," she said softly. He gave a small, almost shy smile. "I'm human too." They shared a long, gentle silence. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was filled with honesty, understanding, and something new, something that felt tender and hopeful. Naya's eyes softened. "I'm glad you're here today." Daniel's voice warmed. "I'm glad too." They stood together, looking at the wide land below them. The canyon stretched endlessly, quiet and strong. But for the first time, neither of them felt alone in the presence of that silence. Daniel slowly reached out, not to hold her hand, not to pull her close, but simply to touch her arm gently, offering comfort without expecting anything. She accepted the gesture, her eyes filling with warmth. "You don't have to face everything alone," he said softly. "And you don't either," she replied. The sun began to lower, painting the sky in warm colors. They stayed there, sharing the moment, letting their truths rest between them like something precious. There was no rush, no dramatic confession, just two hearts finally speaking the honesty they had been carrying for too long. That moment changed something inside them, not loudly, not suddenly, but deeply. It was the first time they both understood that their lives didn't have to stay quiet and lonely forever. There was a possibility of warmth, companionship, and comfort, and it began with one sincere sentence, spoken with courage and vulnerability. "I'm so tired of being alone." And the answer came silently, through presence, understanding, and quiet closeness. They walked back to their horses as the sunset settled across the land, not as two lonely strangers, but as two people who finally found someone who truly understood. After that quiet, honest moment at the canyon, something gentle but real began to settle between Daniel and Naya. It was not a sudden change, not the kind that turns life upside down in a single breath. Instead, it felt like a calm sunrise, soft, steady, warm, and full of promise. They went home that day feeling lighter inside, as if a long-carried weight had finally been shared. The next morning, Daniel woke earlier than usual. He sat at the edge of his bed for a few minutes, thinking about everything that had happened. He remembered Naya's voice, the way her eyes softened when she spoke her truth, the way the wind seemed to hold her words gently instead of sweeping them away. He remembered telling her about his own loneliness, something he rarely admitted even to himself. He felt closer to her now, not in a rushed way, but in a way that felt safe and grounding. He made his morning coffee and stepped outside, breathing in the calm air. The sky was pale blue, the kind that promised a warm day. For the first time in a long while, he felt a quiet excitement rising in him. He wondered if Naya might come by the canyon again, or if their paths might cross somewhere on the open land. He didn't want to push or force anything. He just wanted to be near her, to share time with someone who understood him. On the other side of the land, Naya was also thinking about Daniel. She woke with a peaceful heaviness, the kind that comes from releasing emotions she had held for too long. The night before, she had sat outside her home for a long time, looking at the stars and feeling grateful. She felt seen in a way she hadn't felt for years. She felt heard without judgment. She felt comforted by the simple truth that she wasn't walking through life alone anymore. She prepared her morning tea, thinking of Daniel's quiet smile and patient way of listening. She wondered if he was working or riding somewhere nearby. She didn't expect anything big to happen between them. She simply wished for more shared moments, more quiet companionship, more peaceful days where the silence between them felt warm instead of empty. As the sun climbed higher, Naya decided to ride toward the stream. She didn't know if Daniel would be there, but her heart guided her in that direction. Meanwhile, Daniel finished feeding his horses and felt the same pull. He saddled his horse and followed the familiar path toward the water. When Naya arrived, she saw Daniel already sitting on a smooth rock near the stream, his horse grazing nearby. He looked up when he heard her approach, and a soft smile formed on his face so gentle and natural that Naya felt her heart warm instantly. "You're early today," she said as she stepped down from her horse. "So are you," he replied with a small chuckle. She tied her horse and walked toward him. They sat close enough to feel the comfort of each other's presence, but not too close to disrupt the natural ease between them. The stream made a soft, soothing sound as it flowed over the rocks. "For some reason," Naya said quietly, "the land feels less lonely today." Daniel nodded. "I feel that too." They talked about small things at first. About the weather. About the softer wind that morning. About a bird they both saw perched on a nearby branch. Their conversations always started simple, but they carried depth without needing big words. After a few minutes, Daniel looked at her carefully. "How are you feeling today?" Daniel looked at her carefully. Daniel looked at her carefully. Naya breathed out slowly. "Lighter," she said. "Still alone in many ways, but not lonely. That makes a big difference." Daniel understood exactly what she meant. "I'm glad," he said softly. They spent most of the day together. Daniel helped Naya gather some herbs she needed. Naya showed him how to tell which plants were good for tea and which helped with tiredness. He listened with a quiet admiration, surprised by how much knowledge she carried so gently. She explained everything with patience, as if each plant held a story worth telling. Later, they walked along the stream, letting the horses follow behind them. The sunlight sparkled on the water, and the wind carried the faint scent of warm earth. Every now and then, their hands brushed lightly while they walked, not on purpose, but naturally. Every time it happened, neither of them pulled away. Instead, the light touches grew comfortable, almost like the land gently reminding them that they were safe with each other. As they walked, Naya spoke softly. "I used to think I had to be strong all the time. That asking for company or admitting loneliness meant I wasn't living the way my grandmother taught me. Daniel looked at her with gentle eyes. Strength isn't the same as being alone. Your grandmother seemed wise. I think she'd be proud of you. Naya smiled, her heart warming at his words. You think so? I do, he said, sharing your truth. That's a different kind of strength. They reached a quiet open area where the grass was soft from a recent rainfall. The sky above them stretched out in endless blue. They sat there for a while, watching the clouds slowly drift across the sky. Naya felt calm in a way she hadn't felt for a long time. Daniel felt the same. As the afternoon sun began to soften, Daniel spoke again. You know, you don't have to be alone anymore. I'm not saying we have to rush anything. I just mean, I'm here. You have someone. Naya looked at him with gentle appreciation. And you have someone too, she said softly. That simple exchange, spoken with full honesty, deepened the connection between them. It wasn't dramatic or loud. It was quiet, steady, real. Over the next few weeks, they started spending more time together naturally. Sometimes they shared meals, simple food like warm bread, cooked beans, and fresh herbs Naya had gathered. Sometimes they helped each other with chores. Naya helped Daniel organize his small storage shed, and Daniel helped Naya repair a loose wooden beam on her porch. Other times, they just talked about their pasts, their hopes, their fears, and the dreams they once thought were too small to matter. But now, those dreams felt important again. Daniel told Naya he used to love carving wooden shapes when he was younger. Naya encouraged him to try again. So he carved a small wooden feather and gave it to her. She held it gently as if it were something precious. Naya told Daniel she once wanted to plant a small garden of flowers her grandmother loved. Daniel helped her prepare the soil, choosing a space where the sunlight touched the ground just the right way. Together, they planted seeds, tiny beginnings of something beautiful. Each day, their bond grew. Not through big promises, but through small, steady acts of care. They began to understand each other's quietness, each other's rhythms, each other's gentle strengths. Some evenings, they sat on Daniel's porch and watched the sky fill with stars. Other nights, they walked under the moonlight, talking in soft voices as the cool air wrapped around them. They laughed more often, smiled more deeply, and felt more alive. They didn't rush anything. There was no need. They were building something strong and real, something that felt like home. One morning, months after their moment at the canyon, the two of them stood together on Daniel's porch, watching the dawn spread across the land. The birds began to sing, and the sky glowed with soft shades of orange and pink. Naya stepped closer to him, and Daniel gently placed his hand over hers. There was no nervousness, no hesitation, just warmth and honesty. She looked at him with peaceful eyes. Life doesn't feel so heavy anymore, Daniel smiled softly. That's because we're not carrying it alone. They stayed like that for a long time, watching the new day begin. The land no longer felt empty to them. It felt shared. It felt alive. It felt like a place where two hearts had finally found comfort after years of quiet searching. They didn't need to say anything more. Their silence was full of understanding, full of hope, calm, and deep connection. Two people who once walked alone now stood side by side, not as lonely souls, but as partners who had found each other through honesty, patience, and gentle companionship. Their story didn't end with big fireworks. It ended with something more meaningful. A peaceful beginning, built quietly on trust, respect, and shared humanity.